Welcome to the Pharos Fit podcast, where we help you to explore your capacity to move better, push further, and achieve your limitless potential through fitness, nutrition, recovery, and lifestyle. Hey guys, welcome back to the Pharos Fit podcast. Great to be back with you guys. Got a great show today. I'm here with two nutritional experts that they both work at Pharos Athletic Club in Echo Park. Both great coaches. They cover a lot of stuff, but they're both very in tune with nutrition and work specifically in this field. And they're also going to be heading up what we call our fuel plan at Pharos Athletic Club, which is an exciting new nutritional program. Jack Wellborn and Sayuri Yoshimura, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being with me. Sayuri, I know you've been here before, so welcome back. Jack, it's your first time, and it's definitely your first time with that new mustache. How's that working out for you?
It's working out great. There's nothing but compliments so far.
That's great. I love a good mustache. Jack, let's start with you, as you've never been on the show before. I think most members of the club have met you by now. But tell me a little bit about how you got into the fitness space, what your experience has been, and how you got to this kind of point where you're at right now.
Yeah. So I was always, it's sort of like the same story as many others, but I was always very into fitness as a kid, inside and outside of school. So I'd started off as mostly an endurance athlete. I started doing triathlons, some ultra distance swimming when I was like 13. And then I started doing that until I was about 19 or 20, competed a little bit, and then became a chef as I got out of music school. And so I did that for many years, and fitness kind of like didn't take top priority until about like I was maybe 24, 25. Then I started getting into like ultra running and Ironman stuff. And then it took over like crazy. And once I was like 17 or so, I started getting really into nutrition. I started out like so many people in the field. I was like, went vegetarian for like 5 years. And then I was like vegan for a little. I just kind of tried everything and was into all of, I guess at that point you could say like the quote unquote like latest trend in what was coming up in the nutrition world. And I was like health and fitness podcasts and everything. And I just kind of didn't realize that how big it was in my life. It was always just kind of in the background as I was doing other things. And then as I started training more for triathlon stuff and ultra endurance stuff, I started getting much more into lifting, into powerlifting. At that point, just for like injury prevention. And then a coach of mine was like, you should start teaching. You're great at this. I'd like started taking over a class there. And then I just started helping friends, and I was helping friends with like nutrition plans and helping them with various aspects of, we'll talk about this later, but it was friends that had like gut health problems. I was helping them like figure through those. And then I just sort of like found myself with lots of clients I was helping. And I was like, I absolutely love this. And then I decided to go full time with it.
Very cool. Very cool. What do you think specifically drew you towards nutrition?
I was always fascinated by what each individual food could do functionally, and if foods individually served a purpose. And it took me many, many years to get to a point where I could understand functionality in foods. I think this is something we'll talk about too, or I would really like to talk about. And when I was vegetarian, it was like I was fascinated by like what an individual vegetable could possibly do, like what purpose it served, like what function it had. Right. And that got me into like the much nerdier side of nutrition. And it wasn't until like maybe 3 years ago, a couple of voices in the space started really discussing more of food functionality. And that's when I kind of light bulb moment went off, and I really started to get way more into nutrition. At that point, I had like gotten certified and had done some stuff, but that's when it really took off.
I think we're in a really interesting place right now with nutrition, where, obviously as a world, we are more obese than we've ever been. But I do think there are more people than ever who are waking up to the kind of food as medicine thinking and understanding that, everything we put in our bodies affects how we are. It's not just about weight. It's about mood. It's about anxiety. It's about long-term health. It's about hormones, and I don't recall it ever being like this before. I
Mhm.
think maybe because I'm in this space a lot and I speak to a lot of people about it, and obviously a lot of people talk about it on Instagram. But I think we're really starting to take more of an interest in and have a greater understanding of how food affects us on a daily basis in terms of our mood and well-being and what it's going to do to us long term. Sayuri, let's move on to you. Just like Jack did, just give us a kind of a brief bio of how you got in this space, in the fitness space, but also more specifically how you got so involved with nutrition.
Yeah, so you know me, my life, I feel like it revolves around Olympic weightlifting. So I got into Olympic weightlifting and like initially, I think a lot of female athletes think they want to get to the lighter weight class. They want to cut weight and do well there. Whereas I think my thinking now is honestly, if you can eat to your maximum potential and perform at that higher weight class, do that. Right. So I was in the boat where I wanted to cut to a lighter weight. So I was a 49-kilo lifter and I qualified for nationals. I did it all the wrong way, starved myself. My skin was bad. My mood was bad. I would take it out on my now husband. So I didn't take it on him too bad. But then boyfriend. And, all those things like reflect just like a poor gut health, right? It shows up in my skin, my mood, my stress, all these things. So, and then I went to nationals, didn't do well, which it isn't a surprise. I wasn't feeling myself
You're
well.
malnourished. Yeah.
Yeah. So I found a nutrition coach. We decided it was better if I moved up a weight class. Back then it was 53 kilos, but now I'm a 55-kilo weightlifter. So I added like 6 kilos to my body weight, but I've added like significant amount of kilos to like both my snatch and clean and jerk. And that's mainly because food is fuel. Now I kind of look at fuel as like a way for me to, I know it's going to fuel my lifting for the next day. So because of that, it was just amazing how I saw that transformation in myself. And so that's really how I kind of got into like the nutrition world. And let's see, in terms of like working with fighters, so my husband does strength and conditioning with a lot of boxers. And so because of that, he referred one boxer to me and that just kind of snowballed. And now I work with several other mainly boxing. I probably just have like a couple MMA and just a couple of barbell lifters. But it is nice to come from like a weight class sport. Granted, I don't think Olympic lifters should be cutting more than like 5% of their body weight leading up to a meet, whereas these boxers, MMA fighters are cutting like 10, 15% of their weight. So
Right.
it's definitely different, but just having the background of coming from a weight class sport, it does kind of
Yeah.
help.
Never is nutrition more important when you have a relative strength sport. When you can't go above a weight category, when you want to perform your best at that weight category, that's when you have to be so dialed in nutritionally, especially if you're doing it, on a professional level, because the margins are so narrow.
Exactly. Yeah. And then another huge difference would be in weightlifting, you get a 2 hour weigh in. So I would like make weight at 55. I have 2 hours to refuel. Boxers, MMA, usually in the professional, they have their weigh ins. They usually have like 24 hours or so to recover.
But
So that's
yeah,
completely different too. So it's kind of like a game. So I feel like
it is.
I like working with weight class athletes in that way.
So now it's the day before the weigh-in. It used to be on the same day. I was listening to a podcast the other day. I can't remember what year it changed. It used to be on the same day, and obviously people were dehydrating themselves, starving themselves right up until the morning of the fight, and then would eat as much as they could before the fight. But obviously, that's not enough time to really rehydrate and refuel the body. So, brain damage and injury were far more likely because people were so malnourished. And again, that's just an indicator of just how important this stuff is.
Oh, absolutely. And even now, I don't think 24 hours of time is enough to like fully hydrate someone from like a weight cut
No,
like that. But it
no.
is what it is. So that's why you do your best to get them ready weeks before so they don't have to do that drastic,
Well,
unhealthy stuff right before.
the flip side of that is if it was 2 days before and you had 2 days to eat, the weight, you could get like a guy that weighs 225 pounds weighing in at 180. you know
Yeah, yeah, that's true too.
Let's move on to the fuel plan, which I know you guys are kind of heading up. Tell everybody what that fuel plan kind of looks like on a weekly, monthly basis, and what our kind of approach is to nutrition for our community.
Yeah. So basically, for the fuel plan, we're just doing a 1 hour consult with everybody, going through lifestyle, background, everything, goals, obviously, setting everybody up for success with macros, giving them an in-body scan, seeing where they're at, and then following up with them on a weekly basis, or honestly just like what they need for accountability within reason. And for me, I go pretty in depth. I don't do as much, like Sayuri's way more on like the sports side. I'm definitely not as knowledgeable with preparing people for events and stuff like that. I work much more like holistically with just people's day-to-day lives. So I definitely am really interested in stuff like stress, sleep, all of those big factors in people. And yeah.
And it's a 4 week course, I think, right?
Yeah,
That's
we're
how we're
doing
kind of
4 weeks.
approaching it. Yeah. And then if they want to keep that rolling over, they can after the 4 week period.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I will say the 4 weeks is nice because, like you don't expect someone to change their habits with like 1 hour consultation, right? It's just not possible.
For
And
sure.
so
Yeah.
like the week, it's just much more digestible. So every week we're just being like, hey, what happened this week? How do you feel? And just giving them like digestible pieces of information. So it becomes into more of the sustainable changes that they can make
Yeah.
Yeah.
every week.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
gives them perfect amount of time to like, if after a week or two, they're like, hey, I feel this way, I feel this way, to make tweaks, it's perfect, and it sets them up very well for the long run and whatever their goal is.
The word you said, Sayuri, about habit, that is one of the most important things with nutrition. Imagine you've had cereal every day in the morning for 30 years. You are fully addicted to that process and that taste. And you wake up with that, like, oh my God, I need some sugary cereal to wake up, whatever it is. That's full on addiction. And the only way you can change that is by changing that habit. It's not always an easy thing to do. And in the first few days, it can feel miserable. But once you change your palate and once you change your habit and it becomes routine, it's easy. But it's just getting to that point. And I think that's why so many people fail with like we all hate the word diets. That's why people often fail with nutritional programs because they don't give themselves the time to change and to find new set points because your palate does change and your behavior does change and your mood does change. But it's a process and it takes time. And I think we can all agree, as a club and as a community, we are of course interested in body composition and keeping people at a healthy weight, but we're also very interested in giving people longevity, giving people good mood, giving people good mindset, and it being, not just who's the leanest, not just the who's the leanest competition, but who can thrive nutritionally and how that can contribute towards a successful life. And I think, so you touched on that point area when you were, a miserable weightlifter when you were lighter, but then became a much happier weightlifter when you were a little bit, better nourished and a little bit heavier. And I think that's key. I think the problem with the industry sometimes it can be so focused on weight loss and not really. I mean, part of it doesn't even consider real body composition. It's just looking at the number on the scale as opposed to like body fat percentages, etc. But I think as us now as a community, we've got to a really good place where, and having used InBody, and by the way, we just invested in, the top InBody in the market, because I found over the years, once people understand the value of lean muscle tissue and what that can do metabolically, and how you can obviously eat more calories and you need more calories, you need better food to sustain that lean muscle tissue for both men and women. Once they can see that number on the InBody and understand it, I find adhesion to a nutritional guideline is a lot easier because they have the data in front of them. Like sometimes people need the data, and you can argue people don't need InBody, people do need InBody, people don't need to understand body composition, they just need to eat better. But for some people, it definitely helps to have some data and some numbers so they can visually see, oh, I understand now that I may only be 50 kilograms, but my body fat, the amount of pounds of fat in my body is way higher than the amount of lean muscle tissue on my body. And that's why I have a problem. That's why I'm tired. That's why I'm skinny fat, whatever you want to call it, which is, over the years has been a huge problem and has led to people being like, just do more cardio, just do more cardio, just do more cardio, and thinking that is the solution to a healthier body. when in truth, we know it to be very different. One of the biggest things we've noticed, and I know this is going to be a part of the fuel plan, is the introduction or the train of thought of gut health being a second brain, and how important gut health is to a person's not just weight, but a person's mood, a person's long-term health, a person's attitude. What have your guys experiences been with gut health, and what stuff have you come to understand, and what kind of authors or anybody that's kind of educated you on gut health? What has your experience been with that?
Yeah, sure. I've had so many different experiences with people, with myself as well. I always, even in my clients at home clients, in Pharos, online clients, that's one of the first questions in my submission questionnaire for new clients. I think it has some of the biggest impact. I think it's almost second to sleep, probably, on people's goals. And that could be muscle gaining, that could be fat loss. It's huge for certain people. I mean, minor issues like the odd dinner here and there of like new foods irritating your gut might not be a huge deal, but people that are getting bloated, people that have reactions to literally every meal they eat and have absolutely no idea what's causing it, causes so many problems. And not just like, I
Yeah.
mean, it certainly causes issues with weight loss and muscle gain, as you're having an inflammatory reaction and you're getting blood, you're just irritable. You're not like, no one is happy when they're painfully bloated and like gassy and just not feeling good after a meal.
Yeah. Here's the other issue with that is sometimes people would rather stick to an ideology than listen to their own body.
And I
And
was in
I'm not
I was
vegan
in that
bashing.
camp.
I'm not vegan bashing at all in this comment, but I just know it from an example of, like, I know a lot of vegans that used to be vegans that were doing it because it was an ideology. They didn't
Yeah.
feel good doing it long term. They started to get sick.
Yeah.
They started having all these other problems, but because they were tied so strongly to the ideology, it's like, no, this is the
Mhm.
way I should be doing it. And it's like, well, your body
It
says something different.
when I started, I was a vegetarian starting at age 18, and I didn't give up till I was like 23, and my gut health was absolutely abysmal. It had never been a problem in the past. And I had also it's worth noting, I made a transition from like high school, where, my youth, where I was fed pretty great food, and then I went to college as a vegetarian, where it was like Sodexo, all GMO plants, which I think might not have an effect on gut reaction, but I was eating just constantly, just like beans, legumes, greens, like raw kale, all of these things, because it was like, this is good. This is a superfood. This is what's good for you. You need to have an abundance of this. And that's all I ate, because I also still was like, I need protein. I need all these things. And I felt so terrible. My sleep was
Yeah.
bad. I was just like bloated all the time. I couldn't digest anything. It's not to say that you can't, on a plant-based diet, have good gut health. But for me personally, it was a like 5-year long battle with it that then incurred multiple years afterwards, taking the time to go through elimination diets and fix my gut, which took a lot of time and was not fun.
Right. Was the elimination of certain foods enough, or did you have to take probiotics to help with the
So
situation?
Not a fan of probiotics. I'm a big fan, certainly, of elimination, because you need information and you can't get the information without the elimination. So however you want to simplify it within reason, I think is great. Whether that's a FODMAP diet.
Jack, Jack, just tell people what FODMAP is, just because a lot of people won't know.
Yeah, I mean, it's basically you're eliminating to just like super digestible foods and vegetables. So there's like no grains, no bread, no dairy. I believe no beans in a low FODMAP as well, is
Yeah,
essentially it.
it's certainly no kale, no onions. I think are in there. There's
Yeah,
certain foods that we know cause certain inflammations that need to be avoided if you
right.
are suffering from gut health issues.
And I had a friend who was on a low FODMAP, and it was like, it seemed way harder than just like, for me, I was like, you know what? I will just eat beef. I ate like winter squash, like kabocha squash, and some really heavily cooked white rice. And that was it, because it worked well for me. I knew those things didn't irritate me. And I think that what a lot of what you see in like the carnivore world, where it claims to like that people have, it reverses gut health problems. I don't think that necessarily the diet itself aids that. I think it's that the elimination of things aids that, so that your gut being able to like breathe for a second and not be constantly affected by things actually may allow it to repopulate, and for like the lining of the gut to seal again. In my
Mm.
case, I think that that is what happened. And then I did 2, 3 years ago, I did a gut protocol, which we can talk about, that I think then kind of completely changed the game for me. That's when I could sort of, and I don't want to advise it, but I could kind of just like, then all of a sudden I could like eat whatever I want. I could eat like a large pizza and I wouldn't get bloated or anything.
Tell us about that gut protocol in a second. I just wanted to bring up the point with foods that irritate us can also be the foods that we love, and sometimes it's really hard to not have those foods. I mean, I use the example of coffee, and I know at a certain point, like coffee is not good for my gut. I just know it. But fuck me, I cannot for the life of me give it up.
Yep.
I just couldn't imagine I couldn't imagine my day without it. But we do get so, we get so tired, and I just made the point about not listening to our own bodies. And I'm saying I'm guilty of it because there's certain things that are just so tied to our day that we think we can't live without them, and we stick to them. And I think a lot of these elimination diets, like carnivore, and to some extent like the vegan diet, I think the reason why those diets are so successful in the early phases is simply because you're eliminating man-made processed foods. If you're being a true vegan and just sticking to fresh vegetables and fresh fruits and not taking in like Beyond Burgers and all that shit. But I think that's a big reason for success, is because it's not necessarily what you are eating, it's what you aren't eating. You're just taking out all those chemicals that we've introduced into our world in the last 50 years that didn't exist, pre 1950. Sayuri, what's been your experience with gut health?
I would say my biggest experience and why I dived into it on a deeper level was because one of the fighters I was working with was dealing with SIBO, which is small intestinal overgrowth. And a large majority of your bacteria resides in the large intestine. So when they kind of make this community in the small intestine, you can see a lot of problems like the bloating, brain fog, all that stuff. And so I was like, I was like, I am not equipped to like handle this, and he
Yeah.
was already working with like a functional doctor, but he was still asking me for advice. So I went further into like the research, and then it's just, you're kind of talking about how the gut is a second brain. And so whatever happens to the brain affects how our gut functions. So when you think about boxers, MMA fighters, football players, people who get like hit in the head, they deal with like head
Right.
trauma. It does affect how your gut functions. And it doesn't even have to be like direct head trauma. It can be like people in a car accident who deal with whiplash or falling off a bike, even like body shots in boxing, right? Like you're still rattling your brain, like you're still
Yeah.
indirectly.
I remember sparring with this guy. We're talking 15 years ago now. His name was John Tandy. He was a great boxing coach, but he was heavy-handed and was like 245 pounds. And I remember having this sparring session and then him hitting me so many times in the gut. And then my gut was just like, for days afterwards, just ruined. My stomach was so upset. I was like, what is wrong with me? What is happening? But it was trauma.
Yeah, and it's just, you have like the vagus nerve, everyone's, like you hear the rest and digest, and you have this connection between the brain and the gut. And when it's disrupted, that's when all these, you're not able to digest well, right? Because you're just constantly maybe in like this flight or fight response. And so I believe, so he had, right, his history of MMA fighting. And then so his gut's already a little bit impaired. And then he went to, I forgot where he went, but he traveled abroad and he got food poisoning. And I think why he got food poisoning was because he was already in a very vulnerable situation. And the
Mm.
food poisoning ultimately led him to have SIBO. And so that was like my really big kind of like introduction into like the gut health world, and really just diving into everything. You're just like, oh my gosh, there's there's a lot of things we don't know. There's some things, we do know. And unfortunately, I don't think enough people care enough be about gut health. It's kind of like people who are really interested in it will tune into it and try to do their best to educate themselves, or luckily they work with a nutrition coach that do have that knowledge to educate them. But that was my real first experience with gut health and learning more about it.
Were you able to cure it?
Yeah, so it took a long time. So like Jack was saying, he would take these random probiotics, but your gut is a fingerprint. It's everyone's gut is very unique. You see a probiotic at I don't know, CVS or Target. They're like, oh my gosh, I'm going to take this. Probiotics are great, right? But there's different strains that are unique to everyone, and you need to make sure you're getting the right probiotic for whatever you're dealing with. And so we definitely cut off all of those. I was also he was working with his own functional medicine doctor, because I was like, this is above me. You need to seek help somewhere else. But what we did do was bring in the natural things. I don't know if you're familiar with, what is the word? Prokinetics. So they help with gut motility. And a lot of times when your gut isn't moving well, you're not pushing food down your digestive tract really well. But natural supplements we incorporated were things like ghee, coconut oil, ginger tea,
Right.
all those things. He also did a breath test, and I think that kind of differentiates what kind of bacteria is in your gut, whether it's methane, hydrogen sulfide, all those things. And he specifically, I believe it was more methane dominant, and he was able to work with his functional medicine doctor to figure out what herbs would be best for him. I think iberogast was one of the things he took. But it's also the most important thing we did too was work on stress management.
Yeah.
I think when you're, again, when you're not in that parasympathetic state, you're not digesting, things just aren't moving as well. So getting him out of that, making sure he took time to do diaphragmatic breathing, yoga, walking in nature, all those things that promoted him to be in that relaxed state was super beneficial for him.
Right. You remind me of, modern society and modern medicine is always just finding the pill for the problem. So when you're saying about probiotics, it's I've got this problem. I'm not going to change anything, but I'm going to take this probiotic because it's going to fix it. Rather than going the long way around and really figuring out what's happening and eliminating stuff and treating your body more kindly and stuff. The solution for everybody is just, okay, which pill do I need?
Yeah, it's how about we go for a walk?
Yeah, it's going to be a lot better for you. Jack, tell us about your amazing gut protocol you went through.
Yeah, so I just want to echo that really quick, because obviously I said I'm not a fan of probiotics. I mean, probiotics have their place. Working with somebody like Sayuri did, having a point to go after, having a reference point, having information, and then having a plan with probiotics is great. I think that people blindly, like you were just saying, taking probiotics because they're I have gut problems. Let me reach for this thing on the shelf, take it every day, put billions of one strain of bacteria in my gut. And I think possibly that could be leading to, obviously not in Sayuri's client's case, but into many people could be creating SIBO just out of nowhere. But I will say, so for what I did, I came across, I'd mentioned to you this guy, Joel Greene, who's OG fitness guy. He created this Veep nutrition system way back in the day, has worked with a lot of people, is just a very not out there to sell anything or really and doesn't make huge claims, which is my favorite thing. If somebody is in the fitness world, the health world, especially the nutrition world, and they don't have some red herring, they're not this is going to kill you. This is going to kill you. It's they're an angel from the heavens. I'm so happy to have found them. And he's one of those people. So he, in his book, The Immunity Code, has a large section on gut health. It's basically a book that sort of takes you through an order of operations for getting the body back to sort of what he calls peak human. And I guess we could call that maybe human before all of the things that we've done in the world to make it bad. But one of the first is getting the gut back in place. So his gut protocol is apple skins or apple skin powder, red phenols, so basically just a Reds powder, and then HMO powder, which is human milk oligosaccharides, which is the carbohydrate mainly found in mother's milk or in baby formula. And so you basically kind of load these incrementally. So you start with a small portion of each and load them over 21 days until you're taking more and more and more. And that I'll go into like how that stuff sort of works, because now that's what I put a lot of my clients on.
Mm.
But that, like, my gut had done a lot better after getting rid of a ton of stuff. It still, like, occasionally would get a little bit of a flare up. But when I did this protocol for the first time, and I now do it like once a year just for like a checkup, just since like life happens,
Yeah.
stress happens, like things wear down with the food that we were kind of forced to eat, whatever it is, seed oil, sugar, whatever. But after doing it for the first time, it was wild. I like my metabolism kicked up like crazy. I like lost 2 or 3 pounds of belly fat.
Wow.
And I just felt food just went right through me, and it felt great. Food gave me this like warm feeling in my stomach instead of this like irritable feeling in my stomach, which was great.
How long did that process take?
20 days, 20 or 21 days. Yeah. So it's not long. And when I have my clients do it, basically you just take it as a protein shake in the morning. And then by like the third week, you're taking just like an extra scoop of red phenol powder in the day during the day. So I kind of would just add it to like a post-workout shake. And that was my way of kind of getting that afternoon one in without having to think about it. When I have clients do it, I try to, unless their gut isn't just like really bad disrepair, then I'll have them try to eliminate the foods they know are bad. So if they're like, I know that bread's bad, dairy's bad, whatever, just try to make sure they keep that out for the time being.
Right.
But I want to say now, I think I've had 4 clients, and all 4 of them had dairy problems. They were the only 4 that had dairy problems, and all of them can have dairy now, which is crazy.
Yeah, dairy's an interesting one as well, because some people are very pro dairy, some people are very anti dairy. I think I mentioned this to you, Jack. I had a client in the UK who had terrible allergies, constantly sneezing, skin irritation, blotchiness, and we introduced raw milk into his diet, and it completely cured him
Goes
of
away. Yeah.
all of them. That one simple addition.
Yeah.
But I know, conversely, I know there's a lot of people who do struggle with dairy. Do your fighters have dairy, Suri?
If they do, I tell them to try to it's really like the conventional dairy where they're like pumped with like hormones and antibiotics, where I tell them to just like stay away from and try to
Right.
go for like, if anything, I know my brother enjoys A2 milk. He's lactose intolerant. And I know that that's better on his system, but going for like maybe like the grass fed, like pasture raised dairy options. But if they don't have a problem with dairy, I don't. If they don't have a
Yeah.
problem, I don't tell them to restrict it. But definitely, if they're feeling something, I'm like, okay, let's maybe
And
hold
that's
off on that.
and that's the other problem. People will have a bad experience with dairy and then tell everybody that they shouldn't eat dairy. And it's like, well,
Yeah.
you had a bad experience with dairy because your body didn't tolerate it very well. That isn't the same story for everybody. That's another important thing about individualization, right? When we come to nutrition and when we talk about the fuel plan and why you have this hour-long consult, it's because it's not one size fits all. And we have to really understand someone and where they're coming from and what they've been through, and to be able to provide them with the right nutritional guidelines. Jack, the other book you turned me on to, I don't know whether you've read this book, Sayuri, but it's called Nutrition and Physical Degeneration, and it's by Weston A. Price. Do you know that book?
No, I don't know that
Look,
one.
Jack, tell us about this book and tell us about Weston A. Price, because I think it's fucking fascinating.
Yeah. So Weston A. Price was a Canadian dentist in the early 1900s and conducted most of his research in the 30s and 40s. And he basically traveled all continents of the planet in search of indigenous tribes that had or didn't have contact with Western foods, basically. So tribes all over Australia, Africa, the Americas, Europe, and tried to search for sort of like common threads, and basically found exactly that. That he, and obviously coming from a dental standpoint, he's looking at facial structure, jaw, and then breathing as well, so respiratory pathways. And it was basically the same thing across the board with tribes that had come in contact with Western food, was that the jawline was pushed back. They began mouth breathing. Their dentistry was completely out of whack, just like missing teeth. Obviously didn't have dentists. And then, once you found tribes that didn't have that, was like absolutely fascinating. And what's crazy is like you when you're told it, you're like, oh, okay, yeah, I guess like you have an idea of like people in the medieval times where they didn't have dentists. And you're like, man, their teeth must have been so gross. And you look at photos of these people and tribes who didn't eat Western food and didn't have dentistry, and their teeth are perfect, and their jaws are perfect. They all nasal breathe. They all have these all across the world in different continents. It's fascinating. And so he derived a diet, very simple diet that's basically just like fruits and veggies, meat, grains are fermented. So like sourdough, or if you do, let's say you do, and I follow a lot of his diet now that my gut feels good. So it's like if I have oatmeal, I ferment the oats. If I have polenta, I ferment the corn.
How do you ferment it?
It's super, super easy. So for oats, all you do is you just get like a mason jar, put oats in it, and then fill it up with water about an inch above the oats, or maybe 2 inches above the oats. Put it in a cupboard and let it sit for 24 hours. That's it.
Oh.
And there's enough carbohydrates in it that it'll just start fermenting on its own. After 24 hours, it'll be a little bit funky. If you push it like 36 to 48 hours, it is like cheesy funky. And so I'll do like after 24 hours, I'll do it for oatmeal, and then I'll go 48 hours, and you can make like a risotto out of the oats. And you could do the same thing for almost any grain. You could do like bulgur or anything like that. Polenta is the same way. Just fill it up with water, ferment the polenta for 24 hours or so, and then just cook it down in milk or water.
Do you ever do that, Sayuri? I've never done that before.
No, but the like talking about like the indigenous tribes, I always think about like, Western culture versus maybe, for example, like Japanese culture, right? I'm Japanese. And you know how like we have the record of the longest living, I don't know,
Yeah.
like grandpa or something. And I
Yeah.
feel like when you look at Japanese, it's like all like the, like the foods they recommend, like probiotics, right? You have like, I don't know, kimchi, that's like Korean, like natto. I don't know if you've had like their fermented soybeans. You have like miso, like I drink miso every day. And I'm like, I feel like that's why Japanese people live forever. Just like their diet is just so starkly, just like the contrast with Western culture diet. But unfortunately, the rate of obesity has gone up in Japan just because like these Western fast food chains are making their way to Japan. And now you see McDonald's kind of like all over the place now.
Yeah.
So
It's just so obvious, like what's happening. And yet, nothing is done to stop that happening. Like we know that the introduction of this fast food to cultures is killing people and causing huge, huge costs to everyone's, health, but no action is done. Like we ban all these things, like we ban drugs for this, or we ban raw milk in certain states, or anything that doesn't like toe the line, we ban. But we allow all these toxic foods to be spread all over the planet, which is clearly and obviously causing huge problems to a huge amount of the population. But we just, because money talks, we don't do anything about it.
Yeah, they do police raids on raw milk clubs in other states, which is great. And it's just here, I just like walk to the farmer's market and I literally will crack it open and like drink some of it right there on the spot. But in other states, it's like when I was in Tennessee, you had to buy it. Basically, there was a guy at a farmer's market. You had to like buy it under the table, and you would sign up. You'd pay for like essentially something that wasn't written down on paper as raw milk, and then he would text you an address, and you would go to this address, and in the back of the house would be a cooler, and you'd go to the cooler and you'd grab the milk out and go home. It was unbelievable. There was like this entire like underground system for getting raw milk, which is just an incredibly nutritious food. It's crazy.
And it's just wild. Just wild.
What's interesting is that like tying back in with the gut health stuff and to what Sayuri was saying, that like in areas where people live extremely long lives, or the longest that we know of, just like as a demographic, they've tested specific gut bacteria in those people, and very commonly all those people have high levels of bifidobacteria and akkermansia in the gut, which, going back into like this gut protocol that I did, half of those compounds in there are basically specifically targeting Akkermansia and bifidobacteria in the gut and speeding it up. And these basically help heal, help seal the gut, keep it from, being permeable, and also like keep out what are called inflammatory macrophages and things like interleukin 6, interleukin 10. Interleukin 10 is good, interleukin 6 is bad. These are basically like signal molecules in the gut, but things like apple skins, and phenols feed this as well. So this was like when I was talking about the kind of like light bulb moment of finally understanding how foods individually can like serve functionally.
Mm.
This was like that light bulb moment where I was like, oh, okay, there is like, everyone's like food is medicine, but you kind of like don't really get specifically how food is medicine. It's kind of this abstract, like if you eat a good diet, it'll prevent, X from happening, Y from happening. And this is his first time where I was like, oh, okay, like scientifically, we understand that these compounds feed these bacterias. And it's like you feed these bacterias like Bifido and Akkermansia. These then cross signal, feed each other. Butyrate is produced, and this helps keep energy in our colon, helps keep our colon healthy. And as well, that is found in people that live long, healthy lives. And what's most important is that not only does people live long, healthy lives, people that have less chronic disease outcomes have higher levels of these. So it's gut health truly is of the utmost importance to our immunity, to our lifespan, and to just like our day-to-day well-being and digestion. Keeping our body like nasal breathing and keeping your gut in check is so important for weight maintenance and weight management. And if you're trying to lose weight or gain muscle.
Yeah, that's that's a really good point. It's probably a great point to kind of come to a conclusion on. But yeah, I think if we go back to the fuel plan, always at Pharos we don't just tell people what to do. We try and educate people on why they're doing it, right? And what you were just saying about gut health and helping people understand that what the problem is, what the fix is, and why that fix happens is going to be crucial to people's long term adherence to a new way of eating or a new way of looking at food. Specifically in this area of gut health, it's such a we've been doing this a long time and it's still a minefield. So for the average person who doesn't know anything about nutritional stuff, when they hear stuff like this, it can be like completely daunting and like, I don't know where to start with this shit. So I think working with you guys and understanding and figuring stuff out is going to be hugely beneficial for so many people especially when we're thinking more about, we're not just talking about body composition, we are thinking about longevity. And obviously the older we get, the older I get, the more longevity is kind of the word. Like, I think, Suri, I know you work with a lot of athletes where performance is the main goal, right? Are you giving you're giving people either the amount or the type of food that they need to optimize performance, but not necessarily what's going to be best for them from a health perspective? And I'm sure you do it in an as healthy a way as possible. But I know there's a lot of people out there that will, rely on somewhat refined sugars or, you know, any kind of like carbohydrate to boost up their carbohydrate intake. That can be a good thing for performance, but not necessarily a thing for longevity and health. Would you agree with that? Or
Yeah, honestly, how I treat my fighters or anyone in like kind of like the sports world, I'm still educating on similar things that I would if someone were to like come into Pharos and talk to me. Like I'm still saying, I think because they have so much going on in their plate, they need to train, multiple times a day. I'm doing it a little bit differently in the sense that I'm making it easier for them to plan and prep their food by giving them templates and giving them options and giving them certain amounts. Because the
right?
last thing I need them to be doing is putting in their food in MyFitnessPal and doing all the macro counting
Yeah,
because they don't got time for that. But in terms of like, I am still like, hey, when you go to the store, still turn over the label. Like if you see any type of seed oils, canola, soybean, sunflower, whatever, don't do it. Like I'm still trying to get a variety of veggies. I like a common conversation I have is because they want it to be simple. I see them eating the same thing every day, but I'm like, hey, we still need to get we need diversity in our gut, right? So we need diversity in
right.
our diet. And so it's really not much. I feel like I'm still telling them the same things as I would, as like someone who would come into Pharos and like someone who's trying to fight in the ring.
Yeah. Yeah. I just feel like sometimes if it's a 2-a-day day, I just know from my own experience, I finish one session and I've got to train again in like 3 hours. I might take in a Gatorade.
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
I might grab a sugary drink and just get that shit into me because I know otherwise I'm going to die. But
Yeah, I think especially because they are just their calorie expenditure is so much, I am okay if they do have those more simple sugars in their diet. But also
yeah,
telling them you also need your complex carbs too.
yeah. But the problem is, general public see that and they're like, "Oh, they
Yep.
do it, so I'm going to do it." It's like, well, you don't need it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like I read this thing the other day. It's like Rich Froning has like 650 grams of carbohydrates a day. Like if anybody in the general public had 650 grams of carbohydrates, they'd be in real trouble. Um,
Ronnie
so
Coleman used to do like a Snickers bar and a full Coke after his bodybuilding sessions.
oh,
It's
dude, that
crazy.
guy was going to McDonald's all the time. That
Oh yeah.
he loved it. Yeah. So just a caution: don't look at what other people are eating and think you can copy it. You got to stay in your lane.
Mhm.
Anything else you wanna add, guys?
I think like if people like kind of like what you're saying, like where do you start, right? So I think
Mhm.
a first thing people can do is to just be just more mindful of what they're eating, like turn over ingredient labels. And if there's like a million things on there and you can't even pronounce half of those things on there, maybe don't buy it. And
Yeah.
even if kind of like habits, like you're used to drinking like a certain almond milk, I know I was in a boat where I would drink like silk almond milk, and when you look at it, there's like these all these emulsifiers, sunflower oils, and you're just like, what the heck? And the second I took it out, like my bloating, like all of that went down. So just try something new and just see how you feel, because a lot of people walk around feeling crappy, but they have no idea what it feels like to walk around feeling better. They don't know how good they can actually feel.
Yeah, I think that's true. And I think you have to you have to learn to see beyond the marketing because you get all these marketing products like oat milk, for example, which will say healthy and environmentally friendly and all this shit. And then you'll turn it over and you'll see what the real truth is on the back. When you see, like you said, all the addition of oils and chemicals and all this emulsifiers, and it's always like the less ingredients, the better. The agricultural revolution was the worst thing that ever happened to mankind. We went from hunter gatherer, like eating like meats and fruits and veggies and real stuff, to suddenly like mass producing grains because it was like an easy way to feed people. And it seemed like a great idea. But the longer things go on, I'm like, we should probably just go back to hunter gatherer.
But we'd miss out on all these delicious things, right? The double-edged sword with the whole like longevity thing and lifespan thing is that it's like how obsessed with lifespan are we that we don't, is it, do we want to enjoy this life? Do we want to, so I think it's like, yeah, if your gut is in like absolute disrepair, really pay attention to your body. Try to stop eating in stressed out states. Like, don't stop eating in front of the TV. Don't eat during like a really stressful, phone call you've got to do or whatever. Don't eat in the car. Like, try to eat in a relaxed state. Take your time to digest if you're going through these problems. But then it's like once you're in a good place, like we may have messed up with the agricultural revolution, but we should, in some sense, like we should bathe in its luxuries when we
At
can.
times, yeah.
At times, like I'm gonna have a cheeseburger here and there for the rest of my life, and I
Oh,
and
for
I
sure.
love that it was created, and I'm not mad about it, but it's just within reason.
Yeah, I completely agree. Sayuri, what's the best way people that can reach you?
It looks like I'm not active on my Instagram because I haven't posted anything since 2021. But I mean, you're always welcome to slide into my DMs. I guess email
What's your email?
sally.yoshimura@gmail.com.
Okay, great. Jack, what's the best way people can reach you?
Yeah, I'm similar to Sayuri, as almost as inactive. Not as inactive, but I'm almost as inactive. I'm clean_cowboy on Instagram, and then you can always email me at jackolinwellborn@gmail.com.
Awesome. Or just come to the Pharos Athletic Club and ask for them. They're always
Yeah,
there.
Yeah.
that's great. I like that.
That's the best way to do it. That's the best way to do it. Okay, guys, thank you so much for joining me today. That was a great discussion. I appreciate you guys. I value you guys. I'm so glad you're at the club. I think you're both such a good addition to everything that we're trying to do. and a real kind of gives me real hope for the future. So I appreciate you both. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Pete.
All right, guys, that's it for today. Come see us 1316 Glendale Boulevard. You can find us on Instagram at Pharos Echo Park or at Pharos Idlewild. You're welcome to come to both gyms, check us out, say hi, and we look forward to catching up with you real soon. Until then, take care. See ya.